The government has been shut down, and the blame is flying. Republicans and Democrats both accusing the other of being unwilling to compromise. We had a vote that happened in the Senate where Senate Republicans wanted to send senators to the conference with the House. That failed 54-46 along party lines. And so now both Mitch McConnell, Reid in the Senate arguing back and forth about who's to blame. So first we're going to go to Mitch McConnell. He obviously thinks it's the Democrats' fault. Let's hear him tell it.
Democratic leaders in Congress finally have their prize, a government shutdown that no one seems to want but them. House Republicans worked late into the night this weekend to keep the government open, and Senate Democrats dragged their feet literally for days. Every piece of legislation the House sent over would have kept the government from shutting down, every single one of them. Each one represented more of a compromise than the last. That's how extreme the Democratic position is. Today, they've gone even further. They've now said they won't even agree to sit down and work out differences. They won't even talk about it. They seem completely opposed to negotiation or compromise on a law that's killing jobs, and they don't even want to talk about it. So we know the Democrats who shut down the government will yell and point fingers.
Yeah, you know what? I got it. I would like to renegotiate the Iraq war, okay? And I would like to not pay the $1 trillion we owe for that, okay? And the Republicans won't even sit down and talk about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Won't even negotiate.
Look, I got an empty chair. Clint Eastwood's manning it at all times. And I'd like to just go back and relitigate it. They won't even show up to talk about whether we should pay that $1 trillion or not. I didn't like the war. I hated the war. I thought the war was a disaster, was counterproductive. I'm obviously right. Another giant set of car bombings, by the way, earlier in the week in Iraq. It's 4,500 people being killed a month. I was right. You guys were wrong. I don't want to pay the $1 trillion.
Yeah.
They won't even negotiate. You see how the Republicans are?
I mean, I know Citizens United, went through the Supreme Court. I think that, if we're going to fund the government, I think that we should have to pass a constitutional amendment banning money from politics.
Now we're
talking.
talking.
You won't even negotiate.
Wolfpack has put an empty chair down, and the Republicans won't even sit down. Actually, some Republicans at the state level like it a lot, right? But the national Republicans, Mitch McConnell, will not sit down with wolf-pack.com.
So Cenk's referring to was it the House? No, it was the Senate, actually. They did actually put out chairs. Well, the Democrats aren't sitting in the chairs. It's just such a stupid little stunt. But so that's Mitch McConnell. Of course, he's saying that's completely disingenuous. He knows that there's no need to negotiate. There's no need to compromise on this. That's what the budget negotiations when the budget was passed were for. And we had negotiations that went into Obamacare. We understand that. That's why we don't have single payer. But anyway, he understands that. So let's move to the Democrats. We've got Reid in some way responding to Mitch McConnell.
My friend, the Republican leader, spoke as if George Orwell wrote his speech. This is 1984, where up is down is up, east is west. We have a situation where we have a good day for the anarchists. Why? Because the government is closed. And his band of Tea Party radicals have done the unthinkable. They've shut down the federal government. Now, for us, that's hard to comprehend as being good. For them, they like it. Mr. President, no matter how many times they try to extort the American people and the Democrats here in the Senate, we're not going to relitigate the health care issue. We're not going to do that. If they have problems with that bill, we will be happy to sit down and talk to them about a reasonable approach to do it. But we're not going to do it with a gun to the heads of the American people.
There's three things, John, that he's pounding home that I like, okay? Now, look, always standard thing. He squeaks like a mouse, doesn't roar like a lion.
Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
Two titans battling back and forth.
It's a turtle versus a mouse. But he does hit the right talking points. Keeps calling them anarchists over and over. Anarchists.
Tea Party backed
Tea Party radicals. Tea Party radicals, right? Put a gun to the government's head. Put a gun to the American people's head, etc. So those are the three things he keeps pounding, and I like it a lot because if you don't want the government to function at all, that's literally what you are. You're an anarchist, right? And they hate anarchists, so they claim. They actually love anarchists. If they could, they'd Ayn Rand the whole government and be like, yes, let the killers out. Gotham is yours. Do with it as you will.
Roll the tape.
So that's what the Republicans want, and I'm glad that Harry Reid's pointing it out.
Yeah, and just because he referred to what Mitch McConnell was saying there as Orwellian, I wanted to point out that it's going around that front page of Fox News. You can probably see it right now. Their headline is that there's something with the government slimmed down. So it's not a shutdown, it's just on Jenny Craig temporarily and saving money. So it's actually a good thing, okay, because everybody wants to get in better shape before the holidays.
Yeah.
So that's Orwellian right there.
The government, the Republicans just took the government out for a jog, that's all.
Exactly.
They're trying to slim it down.
Nothing wrong with that.
Now, the question is, who's right? So we go to the American people. Now, of course, politicians love to say, the American people, except they never mean it. They just mean, this is what I think. And so I'm going to now wish it upon the American people. But we actually have poll numbers that show you what the American people actually think about the shutdown and who's at fault. John, what is it?
Okay, so we've got a bunch of different numbers. This is all coming from a Quinnipiac University poll. The first, just about the general strategy of shutting down the government. We've told you some of these before. We've got updated numbers. 72% of Americans are opposed to shutting down the government to block implementation of the ACA. So they can keep saying that they're doing the will of the people. Yes, they're doing the will of less than 1/3 of the people, perhaps. Let's see. Now, who is actually going to be damaged coming out of this? Obviously, America, because of the furloughed workers and all of that. But in terms of the politics behind it, congressional Republicans now have a 74% disapproval rate, 17% approval, their lowest score ever in Quinnipiac's polling. If you'd asked me, I would have thought that was an improvement in general. 17% like them. Wow, what do you know?
So now, look, we know that nobody's popular in Congress. And when you look at the Democratic numbers, they're not great.
No.
60% disapprove and 32% approve. So those are not good numbers either. But the Republican numbers are significantly worse, right? So they're clearly getting hammered here.
Yeah.
I think the last number John's going to give you is probably the most indicative. But this is why one side gives in. Right? Well, they start seeing numbers like this, and they can keep making speeches about the American people, but they're not kidding themselves because they know I'm up for re-election.
Exactly.
You know, every 2 years, I got one coming up. I can say all the things I want, but in the end of the day, there's a good chance they're going to throw me out of office.
Yeah.
Now, not in the most right-wing districts, right? But in some of the districts where Republicans have a hard time getting elected, those guys are in mid-panic right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we've got some numbers on the sort of the generic congressional ballot. Like right now, ahead of 2014, there's still a lot of time, obviously, as you're saying. 43% would vote for a generic Democrat versus 34% for a generic Republican. And Quinnipiac is saying there that that's the biggest advantage that the Democrats have had. I don't know how far they're going back with those numbers. And as you said, now a lot of this depends on money and how long you've been in office and gerrymandering and all of those things. But these numbers do mean something. And they're talking about, you know, if we can just get the Senate, we can change things. Well, it looks like you might have trouble keeping a hold of the House. Still a long time until it happens, but...
And of course, everybody knows you vote on your specific congressman. Usually you like your own congressman a little bit better than the average congressman, although lately that hasn't really been the case as much as it used to be. And so, given that it's a record difference between Republicans and Democrats, look, they're not immune from voters, right?
Yeah.
I know with money, and right now they're spending a ton of money. The ads are going. The conservatives on the Senate side are putting out ads right now saying, oh, they were Democrats, shut the government down. Okay,
Yeah.
so all that notwithstanding, these numbers are horrible for a politician.
Yeah.
And so that's why they will probably buckle by. Over-under is Wednesday night, okay?
Oh,
and the government
wow.
is reopened by Friday,
Yeah.
okay? Hear me now, quote me later.
Yeah, and you're totally right that obviously, like, the individual politician totally matters, and so many are not going to switch their vote based on this. But these numbers can show a level of dissatisfaction with the party, and if you're not, I mean, if these polls are indicating that there's growing dissatisfaction among possibly independents who might have been swayed to vote for the Republicans, or even some Republicans, maybe they stay home instead of voting, and in districts that could make a difference.
When 72% of the people do not like your strategy, that's not a good thing as a politician.
Yeah.
Okay. Now with money, they usually can get beyond it, but they're playing with fire here.